Okay, we'll make a start, I think. You can all hear me okay. So I'll make a start by introducing myself and welcoming you all to this session. So my name is Gerald O'Sullivan. I'm the head of the Department of Technology Enhanced Learning, and I'm here with my colleague Shane Cronin to talk to you about strategies for online teaching. So I'm the head of the Department of Technology Enhanced Learning, as I've mentioned. As a department, in fact, we were originally set up to promote the development of online programs in what was then CIT. Over the last 10 years, we've expanded our role quite a bit, and we now offer a whole range of different services. Some of those services are listed on the slide you see there. Over that period, over those 10 years, we've also seen the number of online and blended mode programs growing in a very significant way, really. I'll give you those numbers in a moment. But COVID certainly, and that universal experience of so-called emergency remote teaching during that period was a key driver, definitely. And I think the numbers of fully online programs and blended mode programs reflects a changed expectation, really, on behalf of staff and students, and a wider acceptance of online as a way in which to teach and learn and to assess. Might go on to the next slide there, Shane. And just to say that at the last count in Cork alone, we have over 160 online and blended mode programs. That breaks down into 80 fully online programs and a further 83 blended mode programs. So it's no longer a peripheral activity. It's no longer something we're piloting as we were doing 10 years ago. It's become very much part of the mainstream. And you can see an impressive number of Zoom events and meetings per month there for last academic year. By blended mode, which I've said a few times now, I should say we're talking about proper, fully accredited programs which have one or more modules which are delivered in a completely online mode or in a completely online way. If you want to just move on to the next slide there, Shane. So that definition of blended mode and a number of other ones can be found in this document here in the MTU Digital Learning Policy. That policy was approved by Academic Council back in 2022. And as per the bit of a clipping there, the extract on the screen, it's intended to provide a framework for the use of digital learning and for associated teaching, learning, and assessment activities here in the university. The policy also clarifies the purpose of digital learning, and a key one here in terms of online and blended mode programs is to ensure that the educational opportunities offered by the university are available and accessible to the widest cohort of learners, irrespective of their location or circumstances. So there's a big egalitarian piece there. You know, online is about breaking down learning barriers of all kinds, be they financial or social or geographical or perhaps relating to issues of accessibility or other personal circumstances like that. As you can see, maybe from the other purposes being listed there on the screen, digital learning in that policy and elsewhere isn't just online and blended mode courses, but it's something that takes place in contexts where you might have students and the lecturer co-present, as it were, in the same physical or geographical space. But in the digital learning policy document, there's a whole subsection on online and blended programs. And just to kind of give you one important clause there, and we're just focusing in on the program part of it because the clause is a bit hard to parse otherwise. It says essentially that new program proposals for online or blended mode programs can only be approved once a formal consultation or engagement has taken place with the university's digital learning function. In other words, ourselves in the Department of Technology and Enhanced Learning, or the e-learning development support unit in Kerry. So that's a new piece. It's in there as a requirement, not, we hope, as an unwelcome compliance piece, but so that we can check what kind of supports people need and also what kind of assumptions people have about what they need and what's available. And also, I suppose, from a more technical point of view, it allows us to identify and track the relevant programs and modules in Canvas, in the Canvas learning management systems. So questions about staff support or figuring out how to do certain things in an online environment would often come up as part of that consultation process. And that, I suppose, is my segue into talking about the guidelines that we're here to talk you through. So there's been an increasing need and more requests for guidelines or guidance with regard to effective online teaching. Now, obviously, there's a lot of ways to go with a request like that, and a lot to draw from in the broader fields of the literature and the research surrounding digital learning and online distance education. In the end, if you want to move on to the next slide there, yeah, perfect. In the end, we've settled on 8 different principles, drawing from the literature certainly, but also from our own experience as online teachers and people who provide support and training to people who are teaching online. And a lot of it is common sense. I will say, I suppose, that these principles won't solve every problem or answer every question, but together they should help you identify or think about some of the more important factors that really should be part of your considerations and reflections and planning. And the whole idea is to save you time, save you effort, make life easier for you, and hopefully bring some benefits to your practice. A lot of the principles, I think, as you can see there, I think a lot of them can serve as touch points as well. And myself and Shane will be mentioning some of these to a larger body of research and practice. The order of them, I would say, isn't key, but it's not unimportant either. So I might move on to the very first one, and then I'll hand on to Shane. So planning what you want your students to do. Next slide there, Shane, if you don't mind. So like I said, some of the points are just pure common sense. This is an example. This is a common sense one. And it might seem like an overly obvious step, but sometimes in moving online, there can be a tendency, I think, to start maybe with the technology, or maybe by looking around for content, or maybe just trying to get started for that first important class and then on and on to the second one. But it can genuinely save a lot of time and make for a more effective course and a better experience for the students if you come up with a plan first. In general, I will say online teaching just needs a bit more upfront planning to make up for a lot that, when you reflect on it, happens perhaps more naturally in the face-to-face setting. Now, the plan doesn't have to be a lot. It could be simple, something as simple as just deciding week by week or even month by month what you'd like to get covered. The plan maybe instead could maybe revolve around the timing of different assessments, particularly if you're doing 2 or 3 assessments over the course of the module. So you're making sure in that case maybe that students will have learned what they need to by the time the assessment rolls around. Either way, 2 key principles to keep in mind would be constructive alignment, which you'll have heard of presumably. That's about keeping everything aligned or in agreement from the individual bits of content, if you like, and the individual activities you've planned for your students, all the way up to your assessments, your learning outcomes, and your overall teaching goals. All of those things should be in agreement with each other. And then you have what I'm going to call here temporal alignment, which is just making sure that you can fit everything in. That's in the sense of the length of the semester, that you can get it all into those 13 weeks of delivery, but also the time that you might personally have to give to, say, developing new content, if that's what you're doing, or Maybe you're putting some extra polish on your face-to-face materials. Maybe you're learning to use new software for delivery or communication or design or support. Maybe you're developing a whole new workplace process. Um, so those are just some kind of commonsensical points. There is a whole range of methods and models from the world of instructional design to help with the planning process. I won't go into them here, but I'll mention one from the list there, backward design, which is basically starting with what you want it all to look like, what you want the students to have experience by the end of the module, and then work backwards. So maybe think about the assessments, the learning evidence. Maybe one starting point might be just to challenge yourself to come up with a one sentence goal or mission statement for your module, and then plan back from there. Okay. There's a whole range of other really well-known and well-tested instructional design approaches, like the ARCS model, the ADDIE model, which there's a diagram of there on the right-hand side showing the different steps, the Dick and Carey instructional design model, and the kind of latest kid on the block there, the successive approximations model, the SAM model. Okay, you've heard enough from me. I'll come back to you in a while, but for now, I'm going to hand you over to my colleague Shane Cronin to take you through the next few principles.
Thanks, Gerard. So I'm just posting a few links there to some of those instructional design approaches there in the chat as well, if people want to have a look in their own time. So principle number two is figuring out what tools and technologies you're going to use and how. So not that technology is everything, but it does obviously help a lot when you're doing online teaching. But this is a good diagram, I think, to represent the various components of our digital learning infrastructure, our offerings here in MTU. So at the very center of it would be Canvas, obviously, and that's where much of your activity will be happening in an online module. And then there are some key integrations. Zoom would be a very important one for live delivery. But then there's also all the other stuff you'll do around communication, collaboration, and assessment that happen either through features in Canvas, like for example, in communications, you have your inbox and announcements and so on, but also then, the more asynchronous activities that you might be presenting to students, especially when you have what we would call maybe weekend warriors or students that take the program not in a live manner. Well, they won't be tuning in all the time live, and you will have that because you have working professionals and so on. So the ability to create some on-demand content and to add some context to your recorded sessions is also quite important, I think, when it comes to the technology aspect and the mode of delivery. So some of those other relevant technologies that you can assess and evaluate for online teaching would include UDoIt, for example, to do a kind of an accessibility check on any of the content that you're serving out on Canvas. Vivox is a relatively new tool that people will have used in the past in a kind of a pilot, but that's now mainstreamed in MTU. And that would be a really key component for live delivery and for asynchronous surveys as well. So I'll post some links and some support for Vivox. We've done a training session earlier in the week on that, or earlier last week rather. But in terms of just engagement, student engagement, I think that would be a really key tool to look at. So Zoom and Canvas obviously quite integrated. You have your Turnitin then for assessments, as people will know, for plagiarism detection, and then on the other side of things, in terms of content on demand, you have the likes of H5P, which can be used to create knowledge checks and interactions, again, for students that are taking the content or interacting with content in an asynchronous way. And a relatively new one as well, Canvas Studio. We're doing a session on that later on in the week. People might be interested in that. Again, with a view to making your maybe things like recordings or screencasts more interactive and discursive, and adding the assessment bit in there as well. So I'll post a link to the training session if anyone's interested in that later on, and you'll be hearing more about that through the semester. So the two really key tools when you're looking at online teaching, though, would be Canvas and Zoom. So your Zoom recordings, obviously, you schedule them from within Zoom, and your recordings are posted directly into Canvas. But right around this circle here, I think it just represents the various ways that the two products or the two tools touch each other and interact with each other. And then also the other tool there quickly is mentioned for attendance, but things like Zoom whiteboards in a live sense when you've launched your class and you're doing the more interactive stuff, your breakout rooms for things like one-to-one sessions with students or just breaking them out into different groups, and calendars and conferences and so on there. So just on the strategic selection of tools then, so we're talking about the tools technologies. It's obviously good to think about how you can ground them and link them in with how you're teaching and how your students learn. So with regard to enhancing active learning and collaboration and assessment. So here are just a few quick examples that those tools might be used in those contexts. So Canvas discussion boards, you might be familiar with them, and if you're not, I'd encourage you to look at them, especially for things like graded discussions or peer review and things like that. So there's a few, and I'll share the slides afterwards as well for anyone who wants to look at this stuff in a bit more detail. Um, Other examples would include Zoom breakout rooms. So, you could do things like think, pair, share activities in smaller groups, assigning case study discussions, or just having problem solving groups with sharing whiteboards and that. So back to that diagram again, that's where those two tools are quite integral to the live delivery. But also, as I'll keep kind of coming back to, we have to think as well of the students who are taking the content on demand, and that's where the asynchronous stuff comes up. Live polling, I've mentioned that already. So Vivox is really, really good at just gauging understanding and also just engaging students throughout a session. So that would be using a poll maybe pre the session to gauge the understanding of a particular topic, or also just in intervals through your session. Because one thing, as we all know from teaching online, is you can burn yourself out quite quickly by being all about the delivery and not maybe involving the students as much. So wherever you can plot out points in your lecture, even if you're to set a slide every so often within your slide deck, to have those engagements or interactions, they're quite useful, and they give you a chance to have a breath as well, and to gauge understanding of the topic that you're covering, and also then encouraging participation through things like opinion polls and instant feedback, and you can have Q&A polls and surveys in Vivox as well. So I'll post a link to the training session on Vivox if anyone's interested, and we'll be having more of that as well. Another example is peer review assessment, so promoting engagement. So again, linking back to active learning and collaboration and assessment, in having students review and provide feedback on each other's work, are also requiring them to reflect on work and peer suggestions. And this is an example then of maybe the three things together, three tools. So pre-class could be asynchronous with Canvas. So again, that asynchronous element, thinking of posting pre-reading materials and discussion prompts. And I know Garrod will talk about kind of the community aspect of things later on and the forums, but pre-reading, discussion prompts, and then conducting a survey is a good thing, so you can gauge prior knowledge there. And in class then, the use of, and this isn't an exhaustive list obviously, but it's just an example or a snapshot of what you could do. You could use breakout rooms for smaller group activities, run Vivox polls to engage the students on key discussion points, and then use the chat and the reactions feature in Canvas, or in Zoom rather, to gauge understanding and facilitate discussion. And then post class, reflection and collaboration with Canvas. So assigning reflective discussions maybe in Canvas, or using other features in Canvas, even if you're just to use the announcements feature or the mail feature within Canvas, just to keep people um, engaged. And then again, you could use something like a Vivox post-session survey. And the thing with Vivox and these tools is they're all integrated as well. So they all feed each other in terms of information, and that stuff is really key as well for you later on. And maybe if you're doing a mid-semester check-in, for example, that you want to see if there's any students that are maybe dropping off an engagement. So all of this information is quite useful later on in the semester. consider what you, so this is principle three, consider what you already have, what's already out there, and what already works. And I meant to mention at the very start there as well, if there's any questions, throw them into the Q&A, please, and we'll address them there afterwards. So this is just with a view of seeing what you have already in your arsenal, your teaching and learning arsenal. So consider what you have already. So your traditional slide decks, for example, can be, and again, this is thinking about the on-demand component maybe to your online module, is they can be enhanced using multimedia tools like ScreenPal or Canvas Studio, which is a recent introduction to MTU. They allow you to maybe just add more interaction on top of your previously created assets and to have something that you can reuse as well, year on year and build on just to increase engagement. And that engagement piece doesn't just happen in the live sessions, obviously, it'll be in the asynchronous activities also. Module handouts and lecture notes that they can be also linked and embedded within your Canvas module to enhance accessibility and scaffolding. And then OER are what we refer to them, I suppose, in our reusable learning resources initiative as RLRs. Those things can be quite useful also in supplementing your teaching content. So anything that you have on Canvas or stuff that you're using in your live sessions. So look at for example, if you want to share content within MTU, you can do so in the Canvas Commons. So if you have anything that you would like to share with colleagues that can be reused and used in another module, that can be done there. But also you can pull from a wealth of resources, not only from the likes of our RLR initiative, but also the well-established Merlots of the world, the OER Commons and OCW, the MIT resource as well. So I'll link to all of those afterwards for anyone who's interested. And I also linked to a session I did last week on just the use of OER and just understanding licensing and things like that. Okay, so telling your students what to expect of them. Um, so there'll be a range of things you could be asking your students to do in terms of planned activity. Just think about what it is you're going to let them know about early on in the module. So one really key piece where technology meets practice and strategy there is to maybe schedule announcements to happen over the course of the semester, just as checking in points with your students. And you can be surprised at times what you'll get back from students, especially if you have that comment feature enabled on those messages. And in a way, you're just as Garoder's saying, you're front loading the work, you're putting in that work at the beginning, but then this can be reused year on year, obviously changing the dates and things, but it can be a quite effective way of engaging your students. So do let your students know about the strategies you're going to be using and the techniques. So, what components you're going to be using, the amount of live sessions, the timetable is a standard one, obviously, but then, what you'll be making use of in terms of formative assessment and so on, and the key e-learning platforms and tools that you'll be using after evaluating them. Other things, just the balance in terms of live and asynchronous. Obviously, in MTU, we've for online programs, there's quite an emphasis on the live component because you have timetable classes. But again, coming back to the asynchronous elements, it's good if you can have some balance of things there where you might have something as simple as a survey or if you're going a bit more advanced with things, converting slide decks into more interactive resources where you can then get some feedback from your students on how they're understanding a topic or otherwise. Maybe just in terms of the scaffolding element as well in your Canvas module, make sure that you make it clear what's what in terms of lectures and labs and tutorials, and also how you can be contacted. And any important changes then to the original module descriptor will be important as well, very early on in the module. I've mentioned already how they can contact you. We would just recommend, using the Canvas mail function because everything is logged then against your module and it can be organized that way in terms of student and and instructor communication, but also how long it might take you to get back to them, and give them any guidelines in terms of netiquette as well, or net etiquette. So that's, how students and staff communicate with each other through the online module or the course. And also maybe consider a bit more granular detail. So checklists I'm quite a big fan of. So something like this, where you ask them to review notes, upload it to Canvas, watch a screencast over the next 2 weeks, or prepare for and participate in a live online tutorial. So those things can be done quite easily in terms of your items and Canvas, and the students can check those off when they're completed, and then you get more insight and analytics as well in terms of participation and when students complete those things. So it's just kind of joining the dots a bit in what the students do and complete, and what you have access to later on, especially when it comes to looking at engagement stats. So I think, Gerard, it's over to you for this one.
That's great. Okay, so seeing things from the student's point of view, you might skip on to the next slide for me there, if that's okay. So I suppose this works on a number of different levels. On a basic level, it just means trying to see your online module or the online experience that you've created as the average student might see it, or as the average student might experience it. So, if, for example, your Canvas module, as might well be the case, is your launching point for everything you do with your module, then just ask yourself, if a student will find this module, what will they immediately understand? Will they immediately understand how to interact with this module? Will they know where to go first? What's going to jump out at them? Is there anything that might distract them from what's really important? Does anything need to be explained? And again, remember, I suppose, that in the face-to-face teaching environment, the students rely on you often to introduce and give some context on, learning materials like handouts and readings and other content. So you need to think about how to carry over that practice, and maybe initially to scaffold, is the word sometimes used, the online or remote learning experience by providing maybe a short explanation or a little bit of text on any of the content or any of the links that you're sharing with your students. And doing that helps them understand how you're helping them, I suppose, how you're helping them to achieve the expectations that you've set for them, that you've already communicated to them. Similarly, if there's activities you've given them, assessments, formative assessment tasks that you've asked for them to do, then you should try and put it across to them how those tasks or that engagement is going to help them succeed in the module. Now, some of the principles I'm kind of touching on there are the same kinds of things somebody would be interested in if they were designing new software or maybe developing a new website. And so often in those contexts, designers will talk about the need for good usability, or more commonly nowadays, we'll talk about the need for good user experience, or UX, as I've written it there. You get lots of different definitions of that, but essentially good UX is just about being user-centered and designing things so that they're useful, easy to use, intuitive, and capable of being something people can interact with without unnecessary effort or trouble or frustration or what have you. So some of the general principles that you can bring over from that UX world into the online teaching world would include things like staying consistent, doing less, and using simple language. So very quickly, staying consistent is just, be consistent within and between your modules in terms of your choice of language, your choice of technologies, the way you lay things out, and other kind of navigational elements. Doing less is, less is more. That kind of design principle where learners can definitely get overloaded with too much information, or if you make them think about too many things at the same time. So try not to lose your learners in very elaborate hierarchical structures, or distract them with very busy design or pictures that just kind of seduce them away from what they should really be paying attention to. So just look out for ways in which to minimize and declutter and all of that good stuff from a cognitive science point of view, this whole thing is about making sure that you're not using up your learners' scarce cognitive resources unnecessarily. And if you like the sound of that, there's a writer, Richard E. Mayer, who writes very convincingly about that, but with that particular principle. Using simple language is about, look, clear, consistent words, plain English if you can, avoid technical or specialist terms if you haven't introduced them to the students yet. If you can't do that, maybe consider adding a glossary or some definitions. And it's all about making sure, again, that the students can quickly scan and understand things. Once overlooked, but now big rule in good UX as well, is to design with accessibility in mind. So make sure that whatever you put together, whatever you create and push out there into the world, is usable by as many people as possible, including people with different kinds of disability. So systems like Canvas have lots of tools to help you do that. And we've added an additional component to our digital learning infrastructure rather, to make it more accessible as well. That's called You Do It. And there's a link there in the text. Maybe one of the lads could put it into chat. But there's lots of information there about accessibility in Canvas and use of this new accessibility checker. There was also a session recently delivered by my colleague Roisin Garvey, which we can point you to. I was just trying to change slides there, Shane. I'd forgotten you might advance things on. Number 6, try to create a sense of online community. So on to the next slide again. So lots of educational theorists, I suppose, would argue for the critical importance of community and community building for learning. So community, as I've written here, can give students a sense of belonging, a sense that they're part of a group of other individuals who will engage with them, who'll support them. Without community, particularly online, students can be left feeling frustrated, isolated, disengaged, and in the online community, they have a greater sense then of both physical and, if you like, psychological distance. But again, students who were unfamiliar with learning online or learning at a distance, they might not know how to establish their own social presence online. So you may need to help them by getting the ball rolling, if you like. So lots of different ways you can do that. You can have synchronous or live sessions in Zoom where you provide a way for students to introduce themselves. But the asynchronous or non-live tools can be just as effective and actually are probably researched and used quite a bit more. So there's lots of asynchronous icebreakers in general use. Lots of them revolve around students sharing something about themselves in terms of biographical information or some kind of media. There's an example there on the right that we've used over a number of different programs. So it's tried and tested. It has worked well, and it kind of combines both things: students sharing biographical information and students using some kind of media. There's lots of other icebreaker activities, group challenges, groups working together to develop a common output, that kind of way. But really, any way of getting the students talking to each other is good from a community building perspective. That includes any collaborative exercises, any team-based activities. The trick really is to make sure early on, I think, this has been our experience, that students learn something about each other, they find things in common, they develop some kind of affinity while learning maybe about a way in which they can continue to use to talk to each other. Okay. Other thoughts would be making group discussion part of an assessment, or otherwise maybe artificially requiring students to incorporate discussion into their assessments. There's lots has been written about the importance of community and building community for online environments. Two key references or two key concepts would be community of practice, which isn't online specific, but has been applied, the theory has been applied to the online environment, and community of inquiry, which comes from research into the online environment. So some links for you to follow up there. On to the next slide there, which is my last one, I think. Yeah, watch what your students do. So next slide there, and I'll try and buy you a bit of time for your last slide, Shane. So again, in the face-to-face environment, we use lots of different ways to tell how well our students are engaging or progressing, their attendance at class, their participation, their non-verbal communication cues, maybe how they look at you, how they don't look at you, maybe how they interact with their classmates, and of course their assessment performance. You can do all of that online as well. In fact, you might discover that the online environment gives you more data for less effort, if you like, but you just have to take a more systematic approach to how you watch what students do. Canvas, again, is a good place to start. It provides a number of out-of-the-box tools, learning analytics tools to check in on your students to see how they're getting on. The two key ones I don't really have time to go into, but they are people and new analytics. New analytics allows you quite a few things, but it includes a way of seeing a weekly online participation analytics, either as an interactive graph or as a table, and gives you the ability then to use that data maybe to send a message to a particular selection of students based on specific participation criteria. As well as that, though, you can, and Shane covered this, you can build in your own comprehension and engagement checks by having online polls in Canvas and formative tests in Canvas. So that's going to add to the kind of summary data that you get through people and new analytics. Zoom as well can be a good way to replace the kind of feedback that you might have lost in the move to online. And Zoom as well can provide some basic analytics like attendance data for each Zoom session. And we've now, as Shane mentioned, introduced a whole new tool called Vivox, which is well integrated into Canvas. And it's all, I suppose, about polling and student feedback, kind of underselling it a bit there. So everything I've said there in that slide, that the use of student and other data to understand and maybe improve the teaching and learning process, that's broadly referred to as learning analytics. It's a big trend at the moment, and it's merging with the whole area of generative AI and machine learning and raising lots of hairy ethical, pedagogical, and technical issues. But that's the search term to use if you want to find out more about what others are doing in terms of tracking their students online. Okay, last word to you, Shane.
Thanks, Garrod. So the final one, and we'll be wrapping up shortly, folks, is just using the available supports. So when it comes to supports, there's obviously on-premise supports like our e-learning studios in the department, and these can be booked for timetabled online classes. So if anyone is interested in those, please feel free to email us at edtech@mtu, and I'll put that in the chat there as well. But we manage a sort of a booking system for those studios. There's 6 of them, and they are maintained and updated and upgraded as we go along. So as you can see in the screen there, we have things like document cameras, high quality microphones, lighting, and a recent addition as well as is sound insulation as well. So they work quite well as kind of as studios. So if you are interested, do email us anyway, because that timetable is filling up there as we go along. So Canvas then, sorry, we've mentioned Canvas, but the staff resources, I'll post a link to these as well. So there's a whole load of resources for staff on our site. And this goes to various places like our help docs and articles portal, our YouTube channel, which so this particular session is being recorded and streamed to YouTube and will be available afterwards as part of a larger playlist. Obviously, there's the standard stuff that you can do in terms of the supports or resources for staff and students at MTU. So you can use our help desk. And also there's the Canvas Tier 1 support and support that goes with any of the other products like Zoom as well. So upcoming training is another one. So we're in the middle of a 2-week 2.5 week program of training. If you missed any of the sessions, they're on our YouTube channel, but there's also a few good sessions coming up over the next week, including one tomorrow on Gen AI, which is worth a look. Um, this is our help docs if you haven't seen it. So if you search this for any particular article relating to any of the bits that I talked about there, including graded quizzes and discussions and VVox, or even getting started with screencasting, they're all available in our help docs portal. There's a number of asynchronous resources that we've also developed, or on-demand resources, like the Canvas Learn module, which is updated quite regularly as well to include any of the new tools that we're integrating into Canvas, or just even any of the features within Canvas that have updated over time as well. So do check in on that. That's a good first place to start if you're getting familiar with the various aspects of Canvas in particular, which is obviously the anchor platform for delivery, but also Zoom is in there as well, and there's quite a number of resources around Zoom also. I think they're the primary ones. Obviously, you can link in with ourselves if you have any questions. We do inductions for online programs, for example, for programs starting. So most of you probably starting this week or next week, but we do offer that if you're interested. Also, if you're interested in any peripherals, for example, like a document camera, or want to try them out, you can try them out in the studios. And we have a limited number of those to loan out as well if people are interested in them for, advanced sharing options in Zoom and so on. But I would say just keep an eye on our training schedule and the sessions that we have coming up, and there'll be more of this stuff going on over the rest of the semester. But I think we were due to finish anyway on the 40 minutes. So we're just a minute beyond that. But if there's any questions, maybe before we wrap up, throw them into the Q&A if you don't mind. I know Roisin, thanks for answering a couple of questions there already. Or if Garrod, if you have anything to add there before we wrap up.
No, do I really just say thanks to everyone who came along? Thanks to those of you watching the recording. Thanks to yourself, Shane. Hope people found it useful. Feedback welcome, definitely. And the other big piece of help is kind of on the screen there, actually. Email us at edtech@mtu.ie. That is not a group email address. That links to a help desk system that ensures you get the best and most prompt answer, I suppose. And we have a bit of a system going on, Shane, that way, in terms of how these systems are interlinked. So
Yeah.
if things start to kind of come up a lot, we'll typically develop a canned response and then maybe a help article and then potentially some training. So stuff coming in that way gives us a sense of the kinds of problems people are having, or the kinds of things that we can offer some support with.
Yeah, and you'll see some of those articles reflected in articles of the month there in our help docs as well. So as Garrod is saying, if something gets is a popular issue or a resource that people want, that will bubble up over time as well. So look, thanks a million. Thanks, Garrod. Have a good rest of your day, everybody.
Thank you.